Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here at the Stoughton Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette. And our guest today, Glenn Castanheira, who's Executive Director of Montreal Centre-Ville, the Downtown Merchants Association, and Serge Sasseville, who is the independent city councillor for the Peter-McGill district within Ville-Marie, the downtown borough. And guess what we're here to talk about? So, Glenn, let me start with you. Friday night, Grand Prix, Cafe Ferreira, Sandra Ferreira, in I think it was almost 8 minutes long, posting on Twitter about what the city had done, and in this particular case, and we're going to clarify this, what Montreal fire inspectors had done by closing them down, their terrace down on the busiest night of the week. So you're you head the Downtown Merchants Association, you know Ferreira, you know everybody on that street. What happened here, as you understand it, as you know the facts, can you just relay what actually happened?
Sure. So I'll backtrack to actually April, because I think it's important to understand the context. April, the businesses of Peel Street want patios, they want their terrace out, but there's an issue because there's a construction site on St. Catherine. And if you've been downtown, you'll know that St. Catherine Street, corner Peel, is completely shut off. And one of the issues with this construction site, which is essential, St. Catherine's going to be beautiful, but generates a lot of dust. A lot of dust. You'd have inches of dust on furniture everywhere. So impossible for them to operate terraces during the day because of the construction site. So we reached an agreement with the borough that really, and I really insist on this, the borough was really solution focused to helping these businesses. And we found a plan which was to allow tents, the chapiteaux as we call them, the same tents you see during street fairs, and you'll see them pretty much everywhere else, on Peel, because they allowed to close sidewalls and then protect from dust. So that exception was made as a mitigation.
Can I just stop you?
Yeah.
When you say with the borough and how easy it was to deal, was the mayor directly involved in those negotiations?
Nope. We didn't have to involve the political. We informed the political, and I think that's important to know as well. Us at Montreal Centre-Ville, as most businesses, always try to avoid having to make anything political. There are services. There are a lot of competent people at the city, and we like working with them.
Okay.
And I'm lucky enough to be able to work with them. So I don't want to say it was easy. We had to justify this derogation, but we reached an agreement, and we went forward with it. We had a meeting with all the services, all the merchants, and they went ahead with the installation.
And the fire department?
So it's important to know that when you do a terrace in Montreal, if it's a standard terrace, you don't need to speak with the fire services. The only moment you need to speak with the fire services is when you hold a special event, and then you have the special event fire services inspectors that then give you nightmares and night sweats, but that's a whole other stuff. But if you own a business and you operate a business, it's like when you open a business, you don't have to call the fire services. You just follow your permit, which is what these businesses did. They followed their permit. Ironically enough, and this is important to know as well, the day they installed the terraces, a city inspector came to make sure everything was legit. Unfortunately, there was an issue. The installers made a mistake and installed the terraces 6 inches too far from the buildings, so 6 inches too far into the road, which represented a hazard for traffic. And so the businesses had to do a whole shebang with a bunch of people to come in and actually move the terrace back 6 inches closer to the buildings.
So that original
Because there was a
mistake-
car accident.
And there was a vehicle accident the same day. Some guy came in.
Because it was too much in the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because keep in mind, the terrace is supposed to occupy the space of a parking spot, basically. And that's what they did. They rearranged it to respect the permit that was given.
Okay, but the bottom line is that the day of, they moved everything within, they thought they were being compliant.
Oh, and they were compliant.
And they were compliant, and yet...
And yet, a few weeks later, a fire marshal inspector passes by, and to everyone's surprise, I say to everyone, we didn't meet with him. He met the businesses and said, knocked on their door and said, you're going to have to take this down. This is not compatible. You're not following.
Even though they thought they were in compliance by that point.
And after being inspected and everything, correct. And at which point they really didn't understand. We got a call. And that's where I'm going to stop and say there's an administrative investigation going on to really clarify what happened. So I'll simply say that we spoke with the services and with political staff to kind of say, hey, are you aware of this? This is odd. And it was made clear that to the borough's eyes, there wouldn't be any intervention in the sense that that's the permit that was given and that we're okay.
Yes, but from the fire department's point of view, all of a sudden, it was the tents that drew their ire because they said it was too close and there was a fire hazard there. And the point, they all thought that they were compliant not only in terms of space, but in terms of like hanging the tents. I mean, and they spoke to you, and they asked the city.
Everything was very transparent.
Right.
And that's very
So you knew
important to
about the tents, they knew about the tents.
Everybody knew.
Except for the fire department.
To our surprise, and then as Ms. Ferreira said in her video, the fire service said they'll be back on Monday. We took contact with said inspector explaining the situation, and we were left with the impression that common sense would prevail.
It's a big
What a mistake
Yeah.
that was.
Anyway,
So Monday comes and no inspection is made. So
Right.
to everybody's conclusion is common sense prevails.
Okay.
yeah, and
Common
not.
sense prevailed.
And Serge, I mean, in the midst of all this, the city is embarrassed the way it's almost never been. The city hates it when it gets the world focus is put on it.
Yeah.
The shame, Sandra's tear-felt video on Instagram has made the world aware of just how silly it is and how embarrassing it is for the city. We do this all the time. And downtown they suffer so much, as you know better than anybody.
Yeah.
The merchants, the restaurateurs, and everybody else. They're dealing with St. Catherine, which looks like it was bombed out in a war sometime. And you would think a little compassion would help, but there's this power trip going on. What do you think about all this?
Well, I was quite public about
Yeah, I know.
it, and I said that it was a catastrophe, that it caused a great prejudice to the international reputation of Montreal. I received messages from a guy I barely know in Paris, and from a guy in LA. In the show business and sports world, saying what's going on in Montreal, what happened? It became viral around the world.
Yep.
And there's the case of what happened on Peel, but for me, the problem is still there. Mm-hmm. On Peel, it's okay; they have their terraces, but the problem is that at the fire department and at the morality section of the Department of Police of Montreal, there are some bad elements in the agents that do a power trip
Yep.
and do random, and I want to make it clear that it's important, the security.
We all agree on that.
The problem is the way they do their job, the way they act towards owners of restaurants and even the clients. When I went to another media on this week, I was quite aggressive about it, and it's like I opened a boîte of Pandora. I kind of received lots of messages, and it was funny because I was at the premiere of the Seigneur Lara Fabian. She's a friend of mine, and a close friend of mine who's a respected businessman was there also. We were backstage waiting to say hi to Lara, and he told me that he was at a very well-known restaurant in Montreal, and that the morality squad
In full armor, with their weapons, at night.
and
Yeah.
they made an intervention,
Right.
but they went not only to the restaurant owners but also to the clients. Searching bags of women, and he was eating with another businessman, and the police agent came to him and said, in French, he said, "Why, qu'est-ce que tu manges? Ça n'a pas l'air bien beau." "Well, what are you eating? It doesn't seem good." He didn't know the guy. Well-respected businessman.
This has been
The
going
guy
on for a while.
was shocked.
Yeah.
And I was I was wondering if it was an isolated case. So the day after, I called Glenn, who told me no.
Yeah.
It happens very often, and I've been told by people that there is kind of an agreement between some agents of the fire department who are not firefighters.
We all found that out Saturday when the Firefighter
Yeah,
Association
who are not
associated with
firefighters,
Right.
but they wear uniforms that cause confusion because when people see them arrive, they think they are firefighters, but no, they are civil agents
yeah.
wearing
In uniform.
a uniform
Right.
that cause confusions. And there's kind of an agreement between some bad elements in those teams and some bad elements in the morality section of the Department of Police, that if a restaurant owner is not collaborating to their taste, they call the other service and
You
they
shut
do.
down the place.
Yeah.
So I think you then have to ask the question, as I'm hearing you describe this, there's a political element here, which is the city, the mayor, et cetera, councillors, and this separate element either within the firefighters, not
Yeah.
the firefighters, but the fire department, and the morality squad. Is there no discussion between them and the city directly?
Clearly
Does the
not.
city not know that this is going on?
No, I don't think the city knew that it was going on. Now they know.
Yeah.
He has been quite vocal. I have been quite vocal about it. And I'll be quite vocal at the city council meeting on Monday on this. Because for me, what happened on Peel is just the tip of the iceberg.
It is.
And we have two directors, the director of the fire department, the director of the police department. They are accountable and they have to do their job. They have to make sure that there is a reform, that the bad elements, they get rid of them, that they change the practices, the way those people do their job. They can do inspections at different times, like what they did at Ferreira at 9 p.m., the Friday night of the F1, the most important night for restaurants owners during the F1.
Of the
and
year.
many of
Yeah.
those restaurants rely on the F1.
For many of
to-
them, it's 40% of their annual revenue. It's
Yes,
important to keep that.
yes. And they would. Some restaurant would close down if there wouldn't be a F1.
So
And they
what
have
I'm
to pay
getting here, Glenn, is-
$40,000 for permits on top, we shouldn't
Yes.
forget.
Glenn, maybe you can sort of tie into this then. So what I'm hearing here is Serge is describing a lack of communication. The old, there's a failure to communicate here. Is it then fair, as I'm hearing you describe this, to blame the mayor for so much of this?
No.
I don't think so. I mean, you can always blame, ultimately, you blame a mayor because it's the ultimate power. But to my knowledge, there was absolutely no direct link between the incidents and the mayor's office.
No.
The fire services and the police services are independent. And this has been ongoing before Madame Plante's administration. We can maybe blame her that she hasn't changed it since she's in office, but nobody has. It's a very taboo. Monsieur Sasseville was mentioning that the city's not aware. Those that ever have been made aware also did not act, not because they didn't care, but it's a very taboo topic. Let me illustrate this to you. And remember how the fire services reacted on Saturday. We're talking about the good guys here. It's the cops and the fire services. There is no more respected entity than our police and our fire services. So when they say, hey, we went in there and we did some things that maybe you didn't like, but you know what? We saved some lives. There were some bad people in there, and I can't tell you everything, but there's something going on there. And of course you believe them. And you say, well, hey, I'm not going to put my finger into public safety. Lives first. If we're talking about this today, it's because not only did Ms. Ferreira speak out publicly about it, and she had to show how vulnerable she was, but also we're talking about an establishment that in over 25 years of existence has an immaculate reputation. Had they had one fine in the past decade, we wouldn't be here right now, because you'd have someone say, oh, they have a dirty file at the... That's the only reason why they spoke out. Nobody else likes to speak out about this because the threat of reprisal are so high. that you can lose your business. I'll illustrate it to you this way.
That's what you called omerta.
C'est l'omerta.
Yes.
If you drive your car and a police officer stops you, if he wants to be a jerk, he or she, they're going to find something. They'll give you a fine for something.
You can always find something.
But the odds of you losing your license are pretty slim. If you own a restaurant and moralité comes in, especially if you have an alcohol permit, and moralité or eclipse comes in, and the fire services, they can shut you down, as we've seen last Friday, they can shut you down immediately without you being able to defend yourself. And this has happened numerous times.
Right.
And this is not to count the intimidation. What I mean by intimidation, and I insist this is a minority group, but is that these officers are, yes, in uniform, but they come in,
And they're
maybe
big
a
guys.
dozen, and they're big guys. Not a lot of small, frail women in there. It's tattoos and it's the caricature that you can imagine.
Yeah.
But they come in, and even if there's nothing wrong, they are jumping behind the counter. They are looking into people. People are scared,
Yep.
and so you're not going to publicize this. You don't want this to happen again. So whatever they ask for, you want to do.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowden Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the hub of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowden Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowden Delicatessen. This is what you said, I think, Red, when you spoke earlier in the week, that we're recognizing what happened on Peel Street now, but this sort of thing has been going on for a
while,
long,
yeah.
long time.
It has.
And restaurant owners, sadly, are afraid to talk about it publicly because they think they'll be targeted yet again.
And they get
That's
fined, and
accurate.
you're saying that they pay their fines because they don't want to create more problems. You mentioned, the tip of the iceberg. My understanding is before this, many restaurateurs have been faced with fines, but rather than fight them, they figure, well, I want business to go on.
Only a very small minority of restaurateurs will fight this because it's extremely expensive. There's one that comes to mind that I won't name, but and the restaurant closed down, but the restaurateur is still in business. He has wonderful businesses. But there's a business on Saint Laurent, and on Grand Prix weekend, the week prior to Grand Prix weekend, cops came in and raided the place and emptied their wine cellar. 24, 48 hours before Grand Prix. They emptied the wine cellar and confiscated everything. Well, they had to fight it to court. They were lucky because they had 48 hours to go to court, and they won. They got their alcohol back. Many of it was broken and lost. But this is only possible because they came 48 hours before. Mind you, what happened to the Ferreras happened on a Friday night. It's impossible to get an injunction during the weekend.
Yeah.
It's done. And that's if you get an injunction.
Had it happened on a Thursday night, when it would have been different.
I'm hearing a situation being described here, and this is really something I'd never really known going on in this city, where police, this particular part of the fire department, seem to be controlling things in the cities like a bystander.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
But without intervening. And I want to show the other
Not
side
being
of the
aware of it.
And if they
At
are
the
aware,
political level.
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yes.
I think that was something they would have to be aware of. Right?
Yes, but
I
Aaron
think
had-
back, though, to Denny Kader. You remember that
Yeah.
famous Denny Kader issue where the police, of course, we were having an issue at the time, and he pointed at the police and said, "Don't forget you work for
Yeah.
me."
Right.
I'm wondering if are we still dealing with a situation like that?
in some areas, I believe so. In some areas, and because I insist, and I say this again, I'm going to repeat it again. It's groups, right? Because it's important for your viewers and your listeners to understand that your local PDQ are patrolling officers. It's a completely different culture than these special groups
Right.
that really work independently. That being said, it's known and yet so taboo that they're not really answering to anybody. And again, it's a sacred area, which is safety. And mind you, it's understandable, and I do want to defend some practices because let's use the caricature of the biker criminalized gang that are operating in a bar, and the police aren't able to shut them down. So how else are they going to get them? Well, they're going to bug them. They're going to bug them by doing inspections, doing repeated visits, to the point that they don't want to do business anymore. That's good for the bad guys. The problem is they seem to have lost control of this and are doing it to everyone. And I want to give you another example, because this illustrates what we said earlier, the importance of properly inspecting our businesses. And to prove that it can be done properly is COP15. When we held COP15 2 years ago, the UN Congress here in downtown Montreal, we had visitors from around the world, diplomats and high-ranking political members. the fire services inspected every single hotel in downtown Montreal weeks before the event to make sure that everything was functioning properly, because if anything should have happened, it would be disastrous. Well, see, they did it. It worked brilliantly. They didn't shut anybody down. If a hotel didn't have the proper system, then it would be prevented from doing business. Nobody heard anything about it because it should happen. They didn't do it on the weekend of COP 15.
It happened in the background.
Exactly.
Like it should have
They didn't
happened.
shut down a hotel while the prime minister was meeting with staffers. You know, they did things properly. So we can do things properly.
One thing very interesting. Aaron had the mayor on his show yesterday talking about the fines. Now, she may be oblivious and not involved, but they're still facing, all the terrace owners are facing very strong fines. And you asked if they would be...
that would seem an easy first step. So
Yes.
we know there was a mistake.
Yeah,
It was
and
nobody's fault. And rip up the fines.
Right.
The mayor wouldn't commit to say that's something
Right.
she will do. Just they'll look at it, and it's complicated.
That's where I hear most of the criticism.
Yeah, well, I'll do my lawyer thing. Once a contravention is issued, it's at the municipal court. I know there.
So you have to fight the fine.
Well, I don't know for that kind of ticket, but you know, when I receive parking tickets, and I. And it
You
happened.
plead not guilty. You go to court, and you have a no.
You don't have to go to court because they ask you to explain why
Right. Yeah.
you're contesting, and they look at it, and if it's obvious,
I see.
you receive a notice that
Dismissed.
not dismissed, that it won't go ahead.
Overturned.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same way with
Okay.
that kind of contravention issued by the fire department, but once the contravention has been issued, maybe she has. I'm not sure that she even has the power to.
Yeah, correct.
No, but she's got people...
cancel
said
it.
But
But I hope that somebody at the municipal court
Is
will.
expecting.
Both of you gentlemen will recall that last year I spoke to both of you about parking meters.
Yes.
And informed both of you,
Yeah.
and neither of you had heard about this because
No.
I just happened to see they changed the parking meter regulations to like from 6 to 9 to 11 o'clock at night and Sundays and everything like this. And I spoke to the mayor's office. They had no idea. They operate one of her Sophie Mazarin.
Yes,
She was in charge, and apparently,
No, she was not aware.
She wasn't aware. Everybody's not aware.
No, because it was
But how's that possible?
because it was a mistake made by the
Agence de mobilité durable.
Agence de mobilité durable.
Which is a parking
It
Yes, I know.
hadn't been announced yet,
But yet
that
they-
the parking hours would be.
But yet one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. I remember how you were both shocked when I
Yes,
told you, said,
yes.
I shouldn't be learning this from me. And you said the same
Yes,
thing.
yeah.
And this is your borough. And
Yeah.
like it kind of compounds the whole problem with like
And let's remind
downtown.
ourselves-
And changes,
They did it to help the restaurants.
changes have been made after that.
after that, only because we made them look silly, they had egg on their face.
Well, when it was known that parking hours, metered parking hours would be extended, many representations were made by merchants and churches.
Right, Sundays, yeah.
So Sunday morning, it's
Yeah.
still free.
Right, but apart from that, restaurateurs are still being held hostage
Yeah.
on a certain level.
So
And the
I
parking
wanna-
are still empty.
Yeah.
I want to go because we're going to run out of time to talk about a resolution here. First of all, and Bill and I were talking when we came in, and someone brought up an interesting point. If, as I said off the top, if Sandra Ferreira had not posted this video, would we even be here today talking
No.
about this?
No.
No.
No, what she did was courageous. She did it. It was impulsive because it made no sense what had happened, and she was desperate because it's the most important night of the F1, and the craziest thing also is I don't know the term in English, but the tent and everything inside the tent had received a treatment.
Oh, yeah.
Against fire.
Right.
The
So,
highest standard.
The risk of a fire there was zero. So she was at shock. That's why she did it, and because she did it,
She did
what
everything she
happened
thought she
happened.
had to do to
yeah,
make it.
and that's how I learned after that
Yeah.
it was only the tip of the iceberg, because
Right.
what happened there has happened before to other places by some very bad elements in the boat services, and so that's why I'm asking a public and transparent inquiry to explain what happened, to explain what will be done, a complete reform of those two services, and a change of the way of the practices. They have to do what they do, but they have to change the way they do it.
You know what I find curious in all of this? The fire department is so concerned. Hazard, St. Catherine Street. What happens if there's a big fire on any of these places along, like?
Yeah, that's what Sandra Ferreira said.
Yeah,
It's
like I mean,
impossible for-
no fire truck has ever. You can't even walk down there, let alone put out a fire. I mean, I would be much more concerned about that.
I would ask, by the way, to your point now, Serge, this is a great idea that you want to have this done in the future. Is there political support for this? Have you talked to other people, other city councillors about this?
I think that the official opposition agree with this, but the party of the mayor has a majority of the city council. So if they don't agree with this,
I guess the question is, why
the
wouldn't they
public
agree
inquiry.
with this? Well, why wouldn't they? This is the kind of thing we're seeing now
Exactly.
needs to be done.
yes, I know, but you know, a lot of bad things could.
Could come up from there, yeah?
Yeah, and
There's a danger when you open a Pandora's box,
Yes,
right?
and there is an election in 1 year.
Of course. Let me ask you one thing. Are you hopeful that downtown can ever recover? I don't know anybody who lives off island, other parts of the city want to come downtown. It's impossible for anything, walking, parking. Are you hopeful that one day, I mean, when the city is finished, St. Catherine, in the next 50 years?
When is that day, by
Well,
the
that
way?
is-
Do we know?
like-
Is that,
Yeah, well, I've
You
been
both have thankless
I've been
jobs as far
living
as-
downtown for 30 years at Mont Saint Louis on Sherbrooke, even in Westmount for a few years on Columbia near
Yeah.
Green Avenue, and my current location for almost 20 years, and I've seen downtown change, not for the better.
Right.
And like many residents, I'm a little bit discouraged. But, you know, I'm kind of a positive guy, so I want to make change. This guy is a very important guy for the change. We voted $500,000 last week for him to mitigate.
Not just
In
me.
your pocket?
In my pocket.
No.
That's how they buy
now
me.
we know, huh?
his organization so that he can mitigate the bad effects of the construction work going on. And it's important to say that there's a lot of construction in Orange County and downtown Montreal, but only 25% of that work is municipal work.
There's a lot
No,
of
I know that.
private
There's the
money.
battle between, but again, no communication between the people constructing and then the city and all the rest. And they have the city who has these mobilité people,
Agence de mobilité.
like
Yeah.
supposed to check when like there's
Yeah.
orange cones and there's no construction happening, and I see them talking to each other, not doing a whole lot.
No, and you have constructors also
Yes.
not respecting the bylaws.
Right.
I receive many complaints now because of a particular site where they begin working with the crane at 5:45 in the morning,
Right.
and you have people living the other side of the street.
Right.
But also, yeah, sorry.
I want to wrap up because we have to by giving you, Glenn, the final word here. With respect to go back to where we started with what happened on Peel, with what we now know happens all the time. We just found out about it now. What's the eventual resolution here? What do you think should happen? What needs to happen?
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. The next step is we've met with Monsieur Martin Prudhomme, who's the deputy director at the City of Montreal. He's the boss of fire services and police services. I told him that we wished for, as Monsieur Sasseville said, for them to open. We didn't go as far as say public inquiry because I don't think it's our role to say that, but we would be behind it. But there's that step, to open up and look at everything. Mr. Prudhomme has assured me that he's at the same page with us on this. Our next step is I am rallying, because now we're talking a lot about restaurants. Same thing is happening to venues. Same thing is happening to our festivals. They're all faced with the same problem. My next step is to rally all these stakeholders, and we are going to communicate with the mayor to officially make a request that the city looks into it. How, the detail, I'm not there yet. Maybe we'll figure it out. But we really do need to, we can't let it sit. The worst thing that could happen, gentlemen, the worst thing is that we lose trusts in our services. And that can't happen. That cannot happen. We have great services. There's amazing people in there. You know them, I know them. They're amazing. If we lose that trust, we're doomed.
So we're talking about a few bad apples here. That's what you're laying.
Yes, exactly.
Gentlemen, I thank you both. Appreciate you being here. That wraps up this edition of the Corner Booth Podcast. We'll see you again soon.